You know, usually when we look at the life cycle of a massive pop culture phenomenon, the decline is, well, it's like a slow fade.
Right. It takes years usually.
Yeah, exactly. You picture an artist going from, selling out stadiums and scoring those huge diamond-certified hits and just dominating the cultural conversation to eventually just playing slightly smaller arenas maybe a decade later.
Like a gentle glide path down from the peak.
Right. It's a natural shrinking of their cultural footprint. But today, we are looking at a drop-off so steep it practically defies gravity. We're talking about an artist going from the absolute pinnacle of global superstardom to releasing an album that barely scrapes together 2,600 sales.
Which is just an astonishing number for someone at that level.
Not 2.6 million, 2,600. So the question we're tackling today is how a massive, seemingly bulletproof empire just crumbles overnight.
It really is one of the most staggering career reversals in recent music history. We are looking at a perfect storm of brand mismanagement, alleged behind-the-scenes toxicity, and just a fundamental misunderstanding of why the audience was even there in the first place.
Exactly. So today we are going on a deep dive into the meteoric rise and the absolute collapse of musician and pop icon Lizzo. We're going to examine the data, the controversies, and the specific business decisions that led to this spectacular crash.
And, our goal here isn't just to recap celebrity drama.
No, not at all. We are unpacking a masterclass in branding, in crisis management, and really the brutal consequences that follow when a public persona allegedly contradicts private behavior.
And for you listening, this is just a fascinating case study in how modern audiences value authenticity. Whether you're building a personal brand, running a business, or just consuming pop culture, this deep dive reveals how quickly an audience will completely revoke your success if they feel they've been sold a manufactured lie.
Yeah, it's wild. But to understand the velocity of this fall, we really have to look at the architecture of the climb first. Because public perception is often that pop stars just, materialize out of nowhere, fully formed.
Right, like an overnight success.
Exactly. But her origin story is built on a foundation of intense traditional discipline. She trained as a classical flutist starting at age 10.
Which is no small thing.
No, we're talking marching band, rigorous one-on-one training with the principal flutist of her high school. She was basically on a track to become a professional classical musician.
Right. Eventually going to the University of Houston to study classical music with a concentration on the flute.
Yeah. And she didn't even begin rapping until she was around 18.
And that classical foundation, it's really crucial to understanding her work ethic. Because classical training is, it's incredibly rigid. It requires adhering to centuries-old structures, perfecting technique, and reading really complex sheet music.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas hip-hop, on the other hand, relies on flow, improvisation, and breaking those structural rules. So to successfully bridge that gap, to take the rigidity of the flute and blend it with the fluidity of rap and R&B, it requires a rare kind of musical plasticity.
But before she could figure out how to, monetize that blend, her life just completely derailed.
Yeah, it was a really dark period.
While she was in college, her father suddenly got sick and passed away. And her dad was, her biggest supporter, the one really championing this classical music career.
He's her anchor.
Right. So when he died, she lost that anchor. She fell into a very deep depression, lost her sense of purpose entirely, and actually dropped out of college. She spent time sleeping on friends' floors, and eventually she found herself literally living out of her 1999 Subaru.
Yeah, I remember she recounts one highly vivid memory of spending Thanksgiving completely alone, just crying herself to sleep in that Subaru. She had no job, no degree, and no clear path forward. It was a period of profound instability.
Which honestly makes her next move so fascinating. So it's 2008, she's scrolling through Craigslist of all places, and sees an ad for a local band looking for a lead vocalist.
A lead vocalist?
Yeah, and she plays the flute and she raps, but she is not a lead singer. Yet, out of just pure desperation, having absolutely nothing to lose, she applies. And she gets the gig.
Wow.
She becomes the front woman for a jazz prog rock band called Elise.
Desperation can be such a powerful catalyst.
Yeah.
Because that Craigslist ad got her performing locally in Houston, which really forced her to build her stage presence.
Yeah, she had to figure it out live.
Exactly. And when that band broke up, she made a somewhat random move to Minneapolis. She just bounced from group to group, an electropop duo, a trio called Chalice, a group called Girl Party, until she finally struck out on her own and released her solo debut, Lizzo Bangers, in 2013.
And critically, people loved it. Critics flagged her as an artist to watch, but commercially, she was still just scraping by. However, that local Minneapolis buzz caught the attention of local royalty. Yeah, Prince. He discovered her through her work with the group Chalice and brought her in to feature on his album Plectrum Electrum on a track called Boy Trouble.
And a co-sign from Prince is structurally massive in the music industry. I mean, he didn't just have her do background vocals. She contributed bars, punchlines, and harmonies, and he kept her feature entirely intact.
Which is huge.
It is. For an independent artist, that kind of validation opens doors that would otherwise just remain permanently locked.
Yeah.
And the check she received from that one feature, it actually paid for 3 months of rent and a brand new laptop.
So that leap of faith on the Craigslist ad effectively built the bridge to Prince. I always compare it to like throwing a dart while completely blindfolded and somehow hitting a bullseye. I mean, how often do we see artists with this level of classical formal training successfully pivot into underground hip-hop?
Very rarely. But that pivot and that Prince connection is what built the bridge to Atlantic Records. And when she gets to a major label like Atlantic, the whole strategy shifts.
Right, it's no longer just about making good music. It's about scale.
Exactly. So she and her team crafted this highly marketable mainstream persona entirely built around empowerment. She championed body positivity, openly talked about loving her skin and weight, and deliberately hired an entire team of plus-size backup dancers.
Which, in an industry that traditionally demands a very specific, polished physical aesthetic, she positioned herself as the joyful, unapologetic antithesis to the traditional pop star.
It was brilliant counter-programming. But, the music industry does not always know what to do with a disruptive brand immediately. In 2017, she released a song called Truth Hurts, and it just flopped.
Completely tanked.
Yeah, she was pushing 30, she'd been grinding for almost a decade, and this failure almost broke her. She seriously considered quitting music entirely.
But then the landscape of the music industry shifted right beneath our feet. In 2019, 2 years after it was released, Truth Hurts goes viral on TikTok. It also gets featured in a popular streaming movie. And suddenly, this 2-year-old dud shoots to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
That's crazy.
And a lot of people dismiss her as just, a lucky TikTok star. But a 2-year-old song doesn't just randomly blow up without a mechanism behind it. It feels less like finding a winning lottery ticket in the laundry and more like she had created this massive pile of dry tinder just waiting for the right algorithmic spark. Was this just pure algorithmic luck, or was there something specific about her brand that perfectly weaponized the new TikTok era?
I think that is the perfect way to look at it. TikTok is a highly visual platform that rewards personality and disruption. So a highly charismatic, plus-size woman confidently twerking while playing a classical flute. That is visual gold.
Oh, absolutely.
Her music was sassy, empowering, and deeply quotable. So she didn't invent the algorithm, but her specific brand of commercialized self-love was the exact fuel that short-form video trends require to function.
The momentum was incredible, though there was a pretty significant early warning sign about how her team handled friction.
Right, the plagiarism issue.
Yeah, the most famous line in Truth Hurts, "I just took a DNA test, turns out I'm 100% that bitch." It was revealed to be lifted from a tweet by a singer named Lioness, posted 6 months before the song came out.
Which is a pretty glaring oversight.
To say the least. And she initially denied stealing it, claiming she just saw the phrase on Instagram and forgot the source. When other writers stepped forward claiming credit for bringing the tweet into the studio session, her team actually sued them for harassment.
Ultimately, though, she did give Lioness official writing credits on the song. But that defensive, litigious initial reaction was a glimpse into a very aggressive crisis management style. At the time, though, it was just treated like a bump in the road. Her subsequent albums blew up. She was modeling. She was touring the world.
She had reached the mountaintop. But highly crafted, identity-based brands are incredibly fragile. When your entire empire is built on the promise of creating a safe space for marginalized women, any behavior that contradicts that is not just a PR scandal, it is a fundamental betrayal of the consumer.
And the unraveling of that brand trust, it really happened in stages. We can look at a polarizing cultural flashpoint first. She was invited by the Library of Congress to play James Madison's 200-year-old crystal flute.
Which, just to impartially state this for our listeners, she played extraordinarily well, utilizing that intense classical training. But the visual of her performing with this priceless historical artifact while twerking in her typical concert attire drew intense backlash, particularly from right-wing corners of the internet who viewed it as disrespectful to history.
Right, and to be clear, We aren't taking sides on the politics of that reaction, just noting the cultural friction it caused. But that moment was survivable because the people outraged were largely outside of her core demographic.
Exactly. The catastrophic downfall, the one that struck at the heart of her brand, happened in August 2023 with a lawsuit filed by her former dancers, Ariana Davis, Crystal Williams, and Noel Rodriguez.
And the allegations in this suit painted a picture of a deeply toxic, hostile work environment. They alleged extreme instances of sexual harassment.
Like what specifically?
Well, for example, during a tour stop in Amsterdam, she allegedly took her dancers to an after-party at a club in the red light district and pressured them to touch nude performers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Ariana Davis claimed she was pressured into touching a performer's chest while her boss led a chant until Davis finally gave in just to make the chanting stop. Another incident involved taking the dancers to a nude cabaret in Paris without giving them any prior warning about the explicit nature of the venue.
That is just, completely unacceptable in any workplace. But the lawsuit also heavily implicated her dance captain, Shirlene Quigley, alleging severe religious harassment.
Right. Quigley was allegedly pushing Christianity on the dancers constantly, publicly broadcasting a dancer's virginity across social media without consent, and harassing Noel Rodriguez by repeatedly calling her a non-believer.
And it didn't stop there. There was alleged sheer toxicity and false imprisonment. They claimed the dancers were forced into a grueling 12-hour re-audition because they were suspected of drinking before a show. And the environment was allegedly so fear-based that one dancer was too terrified of being fired to ask to use the restroom, resulting in her literally soiling herself and having to continue dancing in her soiled uniform.
Which is horrific. And Ariana Davis also suffered from a stress-related eye condition and recorded notes during a meeting so she could review them later. When management found out, they allegedly threw a massive fit, confiscated everyone's phones, had security guard the room, and forced Davis to delete the video before firing her on the spot.
And when Noel Rodriguez objected to this treatment, she claimed she was physically intimidated, with her boss cracking her knuckles and telling her, "You're so lucky," which prompted Rodriguez to resign immediately.
And, these were not isolated claims. Corroboration started pouring in. Sophia Allison, an Oscar-nominated filmmaker, revealed she had walked away from directing a documentary about her after just 2 weeks in 2019, citing arrogant and unkind behavior.
Right, and a designer named Asha Daniels filed a separate suit alleging racial harassment and physical assault by the management team, claiming a supervising agent rolled a heavy clothing rack over her foot and shoved her.
But there is one specific allegation from the dancer's lawsuit that acts as the absolute linchpin of the brand collapse. The dancers alleged that they were fat-shamed, with management questioning a dancer's commitment after she gained weight.
Think about the mechanics of that. The entire multi-billion-dollar brand is body positivity. Finding out that the architect of that brand is allegedly fat-shaming her own employees, it's like finding out a famous militant vegan chef is secretly running an underground steakhouse in their basement. It completely destroys the core thesis of the product.
It's exactly. If you market a product as safe space empowerment and your backstage reality operates as a hostile dictatorship, the consumer realizes they have been conned. The public can forgive a lot of human flaws, but they rarely forgive hypocrisy that is directly tied to the product they're buying.
So, facing catastrophic damage to her reputation, she attempted to pivot legally. But before we get into the results, I want to clarify some of the legal jargon that gets thrown around in these cases. We've seen reports that her legal team filed an anti-SLAPP motion to try and get the dancer's lawsuit thrown out. What actually is an anti-SLAPP motion?
So SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. An anti-SLAPP motion is a legal mechanism designed to quickly dismiss frivolous lawsuits that are filed simply to silence or intimidate someone who is exercising their right to free speech.
Okay.
Her team tried to argue that the lawsuit was just an attempt to silence her creative expression and free speech as an artist. But the judge denied the motion, ruling that the core sexual harassment and hostile workplace charges were substantial enough that they had to go to trial.
Got it. She also had a designer's lawsuit dismissed against her personally. The judge ruled that the touring company, Big Girl Touring Inc., was the actual employer, meaning the entity should be sued, not the individual. How does that work in practice? She is the boss, right?
Well, this is a classic corporate liability shield. High net worth individuals rarely operate as sole proprietors. They create LLCs or touring corporations. Big Girl Touring Inc. is the legal entity that signed the checks and drafted the contracts.
Right.
So the judge ruled that, legally speaking, the corporation is responsible for the workplace environment, not the individual who owns the corporation. It is a successful legal maneuver to protect her personal assets, but in the court of public opinion, a corporate veil means absolutely nothing.
And for you listening, this is a vital lesson in business management. A corporate structure might save your wallet in a courtroom, but it will not save your brand equity. She posted a highly misleading TikTok claiming total victory based on these technicalities, completely ignoring the fact that she was still facing a massive trial for sexual harassment.
Yeah, the optics were terrible.
And right around this time, she underwent a significant physical transformation. She lost a massive amount of weight, denying the use of Ozempic and attributing it to diet and Pilates. She launched a new swimsuit line and suddenly shifted her entire messaging from body positivity to body neutrality.
Which felt incredibly jarring to her fans. But the tipping point for her audience was a video she released alongside this rebrand titled Bye Bitch, which fans interpreted as her directly mocking her older, heavier self.
I really want to examine this weight loss criticism because we see this happen in culture frequently. Wait, isn't losing weight objectively healthier? I mean, Adele lost a huge amount of weight and received a completely unfair amount of backlash for it. Why is this situation different? Why is she being penalized by the public for getting healthy?
Because the public's anger here has nothing to do with her BMI or her personal health journey.
Yeah.
It is strictly about the hypocrisy of her marketing strategy.
Right.
Think about it. Adele never made her weight the core thesis of her musical brand. Adele sold heartbreak and incredible vocals. But in this case, tens of millions of dollars were made selling commercialized self-love specifically targeted at marginalized plus-size fans. To build your fortune by validating a specific demographic and then release a video seemingly mocking that exact body type the second you slim down, it feels like a massive bait and switch to the consumer.
It is the definition of pulling the ladder up behind you. And this perfect storm, the brand betrayal, the unresolved hostile workplace lawsuits, and the alienation of her core demographic, it all culminated in a highly anticipated yet absolutely disastrous return to music.
Yeah, she attempted a soft launch comeback to test the waters first. She released a mixtape titled My Face Hurts from Smiling Too Much. And she stacked it with massive features from superstars like SCA and Doja Cat just to ensure visibility.
And it sold only 8,000 copies in its first week. Critics, who historically adored her, just tore it apart, calling it shallow and utterly out of touch with the reality of her public standing.
That mixtape's failure was really a leading indicator for the main event, which was her full-length comeback album titled Bitch.
And the album was a historic disaster for an artist of her magnitude. It sold just 2,600 copies in its first week.
2,600.
It garnered only 2.7 million streams across all platforms and completely failed to chart on the Billboard 200. Critics called it bland, soulless Target shopping music. She went from setting Billboard records to doing underground indie numbers almost overnight. 2,600 sales for a mainstream pop artist with major label backing is functionally a total rejection by the market.
And when a collapse of that magnitude happens, a business leader has to look inward. You have to analyze the data and ask, where did I lose the trust of my audience?
But instead of accountability, she publicly blamed the algorithm. She went on a press tour claiming she was being shadow banned. She stated that the industry had changed because streaming replaced radio, and she was a, quote, radio darling. I mean, I just have to point out the glaring cognitive dissonance here. That is like a surfer complaining about the ocean ruining their career when the ocean is the only reason they even have a surfboard.
It is a complete rewriting of her own history. The factual reality is that during the height of the iTunes and radio era, she was practically broke, sleeping in her Subaru. Her entire superstardom was built by the TikTok and streaming algorithms in 2019. So complaining about the very system that engineered your breakout success shows a profound disconnect from reality.
Absolutely. Well, we have traced an incredible journey today. From a classically trained flutist sleeping in a 1999 Subaru to a woman who redefined pop stardom on her own terms, only to watch that entire empire collapse under the weight of alleged hypocrisy, severe toxic workplace lawsuits, and a complete refusal to take accountability when the bill came due.
And this is a stark reminder for you listening. In the modern era, your brand is only as strong as your backstage behavior. If you build a platform on empowering others, if you market your business as a safe space, you cannot be caught tearing people down in private. The market today has zero tolerance for performative values. The internet always finds out, and the correction is swift and merciless.
We started this deep dive talking about the expectation of a slow fade versus a sudden crash, from selling out stadiums to 2,600 album sales. So we leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. She built her entire empire by fighting against the traditional, polished, ruthless pop star machine. But when you finally conquer that industry and reach the top of the mountain, does the sheer pressure of staying there inevitably force you to become the very establishment you rebelled against? Can the ultimate underdog survive becoming the top dog, or is the fall just inevitable?
That really is the ultimate question of navigating fame and corporate success.
Think about that the next time you see a massive stadium tour. Thanks for listening.